See, some people from this side.
This side and
Some on this side.
एक बार इस बार आई ओटी अब बताइए
Let me welcome you on behalf of Asian Development Research Institute. I think this is the 7th visit from National Defence College. It is a big honor for us that your institution is sending delegation to us for the last 7 years. And there has been a very good interaction on Bihar. It's good that at the conclusion of your visit to Bihar, you are visiting us. Let me introduce our team member. I am Shaival Gupta. I am the member secretary of this organization.
I am P.P. Ghosh.
Director of the institute. I just add that between the civil and the military, civil can afford not to know about military, but military should know about the civil. So I fully appreciate this kind of exercise that you have, and know the people, know the country, and the realities. So I very appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone know?
I work for the International Growth Center, which is hosted by Azri here.
And he is a country economist. He did his MA from Cambridge. Then Chinmay. Chinmay is also a country economist. He was he did his MPhil from Oxford, and he was a Rhodes Scholar also. So I have requested Chinmay to do a presentation on Bihar, so that our discussion can be on a organized basis. Then Sunita, she is our administrator and treasurer. Ghanshyam Tiwari, he is also country economist. He did his management from Harvard as well as Kellogg. So this is a very brief introduction of our team here. I think that before he gives the introduction, I would request you that if you can introduce yourself.
It's a great honor to be here. I am Brigadier S.S. Deosi. I am from infantry, from the Maratha Regiment, and I am the tour coordinator for the group which is here with us today morning. Mr. Tripathi, our senior directing staff. For some reasons, he will be joining us possibly later. And I will request all the members to introduce themselves, but I will also take this opportunity to inform this gathering that we are very fortunate to have 3 foreign friends amongst us. One from Kenya, from Thailand, and from Kazakhstan. So now I will request the members starting from my left to introduce themselves very briefly. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. I am lady and gentlemen. I am Brigadier Shashank Shekhar Mishra. It's a homecoming for me. I belong to Patna, and as I brought out, sir, I am from Sariksun, joined in 72 and passed out in 79. Mr. Saibal Gupta is from our school. It's a matter of pride for us. We have been hearing about him. I couldn't attend the Golden Jubilee last year. official commitments. I got commissioned into the Kamau Regiment in June '83, infantry, and I was posted in Delhi prior to joining the course this year, last month. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Colonel Rudolf Mengmans, Royal Thai Armed Forces. I'm military intelligence analyst. I was PhD candidate at Pune University.
Good morning to you all. I'm Shamdev from Indian Defence Account Service.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Air Commodore Alok Singh from the Indian Air Force. I am from the Aeronautical Engineering branch. My job is to maintain and train for various weapon systems of Air Force.
Good morning. I am Captain Nartay Amalbay from Kazakhstan.
Good morning, everybody. I am Brigadier Deepak Oberoi from the Regiment of Artillery, Indian Army. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brigadier Amitabh Joshi from Military Intelligence, Indian Army.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Henry Ofola from Kenya Army. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brigadier A.K. Singh. I'm from Indian Army. I'm from the Gurkhas, and my last assignment was the Commandant 11 Gurkha Rifles Regimental Center. It's a pleasure being here, and more so in the company of young people who are really accomplished by the way you introduced. So we are looking forward to excellent presentations from you. Thank you.
I am Alok Srivastava. I am from Sikkim Cadre, 1984 batch of IAS. Right now I am on deputation to National Human Rights Commission as Joint Secretary. And my own state I have looked after several departments which are, I should say, concern of socio-political and other things. And one thing I must mention that I was trained in Ranchi because we didn't have training facilities those days. We spent some time in Patna in 85-86, and last but not the least, when I was collecting the material for my first MPhil, then I came to Patna, and that time we had only AIIMS Sinha Institute and couple of other people. They were very helpful, so it's a kind of homecoming for me also. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Commodore Sandeep Nathani. I'm from the Indian Navy. I'm an electrical engineer.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brigadier Surendra Pavamani. I belong to the Indian Army Artillery. I'm by profession a strategic missile specialist. However, on the social front, I've been Chief Humanitarian Officer for the UN Forces in the Middle East based in Lebanon. I've also been a part of the formulation and correction of the UN Millennium Developmental Goals, and also been Chief Negotiator Middle East for about a year, just prior to the invasion of Israel, Lebanon by the Israelis. Otherwise, I come from Aurangabad, Maharashtra, where I was the President of the Cantonment Board and also a member of the District Planning Committee, apart from being a Brigade Commander commanding a combat brigade, as also the Station Commander of Aurangabad Station. Thank you.
So extremely thankful to hear about your introduction, and especially we would like to welcome the foreign participants. In the previous delegations also there have been a considerable number of foreign participants. In fact, we would like to question them about their own country. So while we will be able to answer a question about Bihar, but we will be seeking question from you as well. So I think I would request Mr. Chinmay to do the presentation, and then it will be followed by discussion on Bihar.
Okay, so I'm going to give a brief introduction to Bihar, basically how Bihar's economy has evolved over time, mainly focusing on the recent changes, but also give a little bit of historical background in order to place like why there was this economic decline and how things changed after the new government came in power. So there is this myth that Bihar's economic decline is a recent phenomena, that maybe in 90s, 80s, the government didn't govern properly, and then that's why we see what happened. But if you look at data, then this is the decline have started long back, especially during the colonial period when they imposed this permanent settlement regime, which destroyed the incentive structure in the area of agriculture. So basically, landlords had all the power to collect taxes, and they could, and anything above that limit, they could just keep for themselves. So there was range of intermediaries, and they would very exploitative structure where individual farmers had no incentive to really improve productivity, raise productivity. And this also resulted in lower public investment and also. During colonial era itself, we faced very regressive economic policies. And then even after independence, it continued. The central government imposed a lot of discriminatory policies, especially freight equalization policy that destroyed Bihar's comparative advantage because Bihar was rich in mineral resources and all, but what freight equalization policy does is to equalize the rates throughout India. So no industry has any incentive to come in industry if they can get the inputs at the same price, say, in a coastal area. So again, these policies continued, and that has. And finally, there was bifurcation of state in 2000 where Jharkhand was created, and most of the industries went to Jharkhand, and Bihar mostly had a huge population without much resources. So again, that led to some further economic marginalization of Bihar. And then, so by end of 2000, early 2000, Bihar was considered as a failed state. Because of these reasons, law and order was abysmal, caste-based private armies who kill innocent people, finance structure was in shambles. Bihar had lowest per capita development expenditure. Whatever you look at, Bihar was at the bottom. So by 2000, it was considered a perfect example of failed state. And this some data. And then in 2005, as most of you know, that the new government came in power, the NDA government, and that replaced the previous RJD government that had managed to retain power mainly due to support from underprivileged castes. And the new government that came in power actually implemented a wide range of reforms, and that has led to this turnaround. And if you look at the politics of it, this is partly also because they found what is called a coalition of extremes by co-opting elites into the process. Earlier, elites were excluded from the state, so that led to a lot of conflict. So that provided a stability, and they used it to implement a lot of reforms that has led to the turnaround. And I'll briefly discuss some of the key elements of Bihar's turnaround story. First is, of course, establishment of law and order. Again, wide range of reforms, including strengthening jail administration, introduction of speedy trials mechanism, special drives to nab perpetrators of economic offences. So for last 5-6 years, there have been priority areas to establish law and order so that it creates an environment where people can engage into various types of economic activity, and government has been very successful in re-establishing law and order. Then again, in areas of human capital, especially education, big improvement, like substantial increase in enrollment rates. Earlier, say in 2005, out of school children was around 13%, now it has reduced to only 3%. Then there has been massive recruitment of teachers to strengthen school capacity. Then there has been a lot of innovative policies, for instance, this Chief Minister's bicycle scheme. It's this kind of conditional cash transfer that has led to significant increase in enrollment rate among for girls in class 9, because the dropout rates were very high. So this has been very successful. There have been studies that show there has been more than 6% percentage point increase in the enrollment rate. So it's pretty good. Again, in case of health, government has invested a lot of money. Public health centers have been strengthened. And if you look at data, in 2005, the number of patients visiting a PHC was only 39, and now around 8,000 patients visit every month. So that clearly suggests that there has been some improvement, and that's why people have started going to these PHCs. And again, other outcome indicators, for instance, the immunization rate increased from 18% to 70%. That's a massive improvement within a span of 5 to 6 years. Infant mortality rate again declined from 61 in 2005 to 44. So whatever you look at, there has been a huge improvement within 5-6 years, which is a great achievement. And again, physical infrastructure, one of the top priority, especially roads, received top priority of the government. So around 55,000 kilometers major and rural roads have been constructed in last 7 years. And now, so 30 kilometer road is currently being constructed per day as opposed to 3.3 kilometer in 2005. So clearly a lot of investment happening in the area of physical infrastructure. Similarly for bridges, around 12,000 bridges have been constructed to enhance connectivity. And this is very interesting, the turnaround story of Bihar State Bridge Corporation Limited, which is completely defunct in 2005, but then government decided to brought good people, and they make it and that's like partly responsible for why Bihar managed to construct really good quality bridges within 4 or 5 years. So, and it's very interesting case study. I don't have time to get into the details, but this suggests how you can strengthen public health, public sector companies. So just assuming that just going for privatization may not solve for certain types of things, you might want to strengthen the existing system. And of course the focus has been improving governance, and there's been a lot of interesting policies. One is this Right to Public Service Act, which imposes financial penalties on government officials who fail to provide particular service within a stipulated time. So it was, so for a lot of say if you want a certificate or a caste certificate, these birth certificate and all, then there was no timeline. So you apply for it and wait forever. But government have set up this that within 15 days you have to provide these services. So that has led to some improvement in the governance. And then there's this direct grievance redressal mechanism where the government holds Janta Darbar, including the Chief Minister, where they can listen to people's grievances and work on that. And there has been this anti-corruption legislation. Then several other innovative use of technology, for instance, phone-based RTI, because a lot of people were very literate, so they couldn't really file application. So the government came up with this idea that you could just register your complaint on phone, and there will be someone who can write down your complaint and send it off. So that was again that was like context-based policy making. So when you know a lot of people can't really read or write, then you use technology to empower them. There are plenty of examples. This phone-based RTI is just one of them. And all this has led to inclusive growth, by which I mean that the poor has participated in this growth process. So as most of you know, that Bihar has been growing for more than 10% in the last 7-8 years. That has not only benefited the rich but poor as well. If you look at the poverty rates, so in 2004-05 the poverty rate was around 54%. So 54% of the people were below poverty line, and the recent data in 2011-12 suggests that that has reduced to 33% only. So there has been this 20% reduction within 5-6 years. So again, it shows that the benefits are trickling down, and it's just not confining of a small section of people. But having said that, there are of course some challenges. One is of course now, given the fact that BJP is no more part of this coalition government, this political stability, we are not sure whether things will be stable in the long run, and whether the government will be able to come back in power. So there is this political instability problem that have come up, and of course this quality of public services needs improvements. There has been huge increase in like quantitative terms, but the quality hasn't really improved much, and government needs to focus more on that, designing, monitoring structure so that the quality improves as well. And the private sector investment hasn't taken place as much as the government expected, and this is partly because of power unavailability, and most important land availability of land, because Bihar is the highest population density ratio, and that basically means that it's very difficult to acquire land. For a small plot of land, you might have to compensate like thousands of farmers. So that increases the transaction cost, and also a lot of industry has been complaining that they haven't managed to acquire land for their industry. So the government definitely needs to work on that. And then of course, if you look at the finance side, then it's still heavily dependent on external resources. So government's own resources is only 25% of the overall expenditure. So in the long run, government definitely need to increase that, so that they can design their policies that is more suitable. Because if you are relying on money from, say, center or any other bodies, then you have to also adhere to certain conditionalities that come with it, and that may not be suitable for you. So in the long run, you have to raise your own resources so that you can design mechanism that is most suitable. So I think I will just stop here, and then maybe I'll be happy to take questions if you have any.
I've got a basic question. You know, your entire presentation dwells on statistics. From what we've been able to gather, including visits on ground, is that there does not seem to be confidence of the statistics that you've showed with regard to the veracity of the data that has been collected. So the entire presentation hinges on what is the quality and the source of your data. Because what we've done on ground, situation is totally different.
Right.
So how do you substantiate, because I'm not convinced.
Right. Okay, so let me say one thing. So of course, the data quality may not be very good, but what I have done is to compare over time. So say if you collect, say for instance, poverty figures, it's relying on consumption data. So in 2005 we did a, so the
Who has done the survey? Yeah,
oh, that's done by planning commission. Yeah, so I'm mostly relying on.
So if
That's the whole issue. The government body, we all know now, because having been in the part of the governance,
Right.
there's a lot of fudging which is happening because everyone wants to justify the existence.
Right.
Therefore, the entire question comes up because we've seen Manrega yesterday, I've seen it in Tamil Nadu, I've seen it in Andhra, I've seen it in Bihar, I've seen it in UP. The figures which are being quoted by Tamil Nadu, they are not even as much as what you're quoting. And the implementation is at least say 200-fold better. But what we see here is that the implementation is far too less. But your figures are indicating as if the implementation is far too much.
No, so I think there has been improvement over time. So earlier the base was, by 2005, most of the statistics, whatever you look at, it was really bad. So there has been a huge improvement. That is not to say that we are close to, say, Tamil Nadu or anything. We still need to go a long way, but there has been a great improvement in terms of percentage.
Whatever you have expressed, your doubt is quite understandable. I think we should discuss the whole thing at two levels. On the question of quality of data, Dr. K.G. was one of the topmost statisticians in the country, he will be able to tell. Most of the statistics that we are showing here has been collected by CSO, which is sanctioned by the Government of India, and which is a comparable data. As far as your concern that things are not as good as in Tamil Nadu and other places, I completely agree with you that Bihar till recently was a non-functional state. In the pre-independence period, Bihar was one of the very few areas of the old Bengal presidency where governance was limited. Historically it was limited because, as Chinmay had mentioned, that it is part of a government settled area where the collection of revenue was limited. So the spending on public services, on governance was also limited. But you are from Aurangabad, from Maharashtra, from Tamil Nadu. These are all Raitwari area. Now, theoretically in the Raitwari area, the quality of governance was much better even during the pre-independence period. So if you take the aggregated figure, even in the pre-independence period, the per capita investment in, say, education, in health, in police was much higher, even in the pre-independence period. Unfortunately, in the post-independence period, if you go by any indicators, per capita investment in plan or non-plan or any other thing was one of the lowest in the country. So even the governance was also very bad. There was no functioning government. Here most of the time the anti-social who played a much more important role. But what Bihar had seen, because of various movements, social movement, social justice movement, communist movement, Naxalite movement, there has been electoral democratization. But the electoral democratization didn't get converted into proper governance. Only in 2005, there was semblance of governance which was established in the place legislation. And essentially what Chinmay was trying to say, that what has been the story of governance since 2005. But we can enter into, we know about the country as a whole, that if you want to understand any regional social profile, these are conditioned by 4 factors. One, wherever the Britishers came, those areas were subjected to maximum exploitation. So Bengal Presidency, Bihar was one of the places where deindustrialization took place, extermination of various other artisans took place. So you will not find first, second generations entrepreneurs here, which is not the case in, say, in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu and other places. Secondly, because of the land tenure system, here it was a permanent settlement. In south it was Raitwari, in Punjab it was Malwari system. So these were much more progressive model. Third, the public investment took place even in the pre-independence period. So it's a very interesting that no new area has developed in the post-independence period, which was not developed in the pre-independence period. So if Punjab developed in the post-independence, it was developed in the pre-independence period also because of public investment and various other things. And last point I would like to mention that the character of social movement that had emerged, for example, in your state, the anti-Brahmin movement was not limited to social issues, but it got converted into, say, cooperative movements on many other economic development things. In Tamil Nadu, the same thing happened. That type of social movement did not take place. Here, the unit of social identity was either caste or nation. There was no subnational identity. But in most of the South and Western India, there was a strong subnational identity which led to sense of ownership of the state, and that triggered development. I mean, in the post-independence period, if you see, if nation state was built by Nehru, in the regional area, for example, Y.V. Chaman built Maharashtra, Kamraj built Tamil Nadu. There were various other people. For example, Cairo built Punjab. So that building of the state did not take place. What Chinmay was trying to say, that for the first time state building which was done either in the pre-independence period or at best in the post-independence period by some of the luminaries. For example, if somebody is from Orissa, for example, Biju Patnaik, he built Orissa. Many luminaries were responsible. That did not take place in place like Bihar. Now I will request Dr. Ghosh, who is our main brain trust here, to explain the data thing, if you can clarify this point.
Yes, there has been this question, is the data reliable or not? It's very difficult to say whether it's reliable or not, but one of the ways by which a statistician will judge whether the data is reliable or not is to see whether data from different sources match or not. Okay. Many of the data that we have in this, which Chinmay was giving, is state government data. But let me give you some data which is not from the state government. It is by the central government. One data is the literacy rate in Bihar in 2011 and 2001. Between 2001 and 2011, the literacy rate in Bihar increased by 17%, which is the highest in the country. Level is low. That's a different thing altogether. We are still, the literacy rate is lowest in Bihar, but the jump that we have made is the largest numbers. Okay, I think it became 40 to 57 or something like that. That's independent source data. 2001, 2011. Let me give you another one. National Sample Survey Organization, you must know it, NSSO, prepares poverty data. The last one is done in 2011-12. Before that we had done in 2009-10. Just 1 year before there was a separate one. 9-10 was a normal year. And before that we had 2004-5. So between 2004-5 and 2011-12, the drop in poverty rate in Bihar again was the largest. I think that's about 13%, 20 percentage points, from 53 to 30. That's an independent source. Okay. A third source that is I give you is that Labour Bureau, which is office in Shimla. Shimla has a Labour Bureau office. They collect wage data throughout India every year. To my utter surprise, I did not believe, but I checked it. The rural wage rate in Bihar has gone substantially up in last couple of years. Right now, even in the villages, you get a wage rate which is substantially more than 100 rupees. About 10-15 years back, it used to be 50, 60 rupees, 70 rupees. You see. One of the reasons they say that Narega is working. Not that everyone gets the wage rate paid by Narega. Everyone doesn't get it. But once the Narega is functioning, it becomes a benchmark. Benchmark. Sarkar jab itne deta hai to humko kam se kam itna dijiye. That benchmark is working, and to the extent that Bihar farmers are paying it, that's one way. So there are a couple of things. There is another source. Registrar General of India collects data on 4 important indicators of health. One is the expectation of life at birth, then infant mortality rate, then crude birth rate. In crude birth rate, we are still behind. The population in Bihar is still going. Between 2001 and 2005, all India figure rose by 17%, we rose by 25%. So the demographic transition, which many states have experienced, we haven't been able to do that well. But life expectancy of birth in Bihar is pretty close to the national average. We are the poorest. Our income is 60% lower than the national average. 60% lower. Yet the life expectancy of birth at Bihar is pretty close to the national average. So that shows some of the things. IMR also is close to the national average. UP, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, they all have much higher IMR. That's some of the corroborating data that we have. Another reason why this figure looks a little higher is that, you see, if your level is very low, the growth rate is very easy for you to achieve. At a low level, acquiring a high growth rate is much easier affair. So, in fact, Bihar government is now saying that yes, we have been able to bring double-digit growth rate in last 10 years. But we may not be able to maintain this growth rate in the coming years because we are no longer at a low level. So that's the reason we have been requesting for the special status. That's a political issue, that's a different altogether. But nevertheless, I should think that because of the corroborating evidence that you have from independent sources, this data is, it may not be exact 10%, might be slightly less, 9%, that is different altogether. But the transformation has taken place. That's for sure. That's for sure. If you compare Bihar with other states like Tamil Nadu, exceptionally good insofar as these development programs are concerned. Shehbaz must be knowing better than you, whether it's Manrega or midday meal scheme. Tamil Nadu ka record bahut acha hai, it's very good. So, compared to them, but compared to what we were about a decade back, we are in a much better place, much better
I
place.
think we could have another issue coming. Anybody else, any question should you have? Yeah, please.
In fact, in the presentation, it's good to know about law and order and roads around, something we have seen, something we have heard. But you have not touched upon the issue of community mobilization. A lot of things are happening as far as the self-help groups are concerned. Not only under the schemes of Government of India, but in Bihar you have the recent World Bank scheme, which is going on in several districts. It began with 3 districts, and now I believe it has spread to not less than 10-12 districts. Secondly, so I would like to know something about it. You talked about public sector turnaround. You mentioned one organization. I'm sure others must have also done something. So could you kindly tell us? Thirdly, the urban scenario, as we have seen about 3-4 towns also. I feel that a lot of effort is necessary still as far as regulation of the essential services is concerned, and something which is visible. I mean, we should not hide it, and it is a matter of concern, is that, garbage management. I mean, it is worst in Patna, but slightly better in other 3-4 towns we have seen. Last but not the least, what Dr. Ghosh said about, or you also mentioned about the growth rate. I would like to seek some clarification. If you say 10 years, it cannot be 10 years, because your slide somewhere also shows, and we know also that something has happened only after 2005. Secondly, I don't know whether it is 10% or 8% or 9%, because government also claims figures of more than 10%. That's all. Your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Let me take about this.
Community mobilization, SHG part. There are some states where far ahead, so far as the SHG movement is concerned. Two fundamental vehicles of community mobilization in India. One is SHG, other is PRI. This PRI in Bihar. Oh, I see. Sorry. SHG is self-help group. It's for both men and women, but I think in 70 to 80% of the cases it is women self-help groups. It is they who take part in that. And PRA is the public Panchayati Raj system, which is the third tier of the government, central government, state government, and below third tier of the governments. Shehbaz will be knowing much better about it. You see, the political process in Bihar, even at the grassroots level, is extremely thick. This is not Orissa. This is not Madhya Pradesh, where the rural populations and the rural politics is far more subdued. Okay, people here, in spite of being very moderately literate, contest for their rights. And we say that PRI elections in Bihar are far more representative of the power structure than in Madhya Pradesh, than in Uttar Pradesh, than in Orissa, than in many other places. Because people take part. Sorry, in Bihar, there is a phenomenon called dummy candidates winning elections. If the seat is reserved for women, some women will be contesting the election, but it is our husband or brother behind her who controls everything. So she is a dummy candidate. This is widely prevalent in many parts of India. It is far less in Bihar. There are cases where I think one Muslim woman won a Jilla Parishad election which was not reserved. Okay, that is the kind of mobilization they have. People who are supposed to be in the disadvantaged group, they have won elections which is in seats which is not reserved. So that mobilization part is much stronger in PRI. So far as the SHG is concerned, self-help is concerned, the extent of SHG activities in Bihar is much less compared to Andhra Pradesh, even Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. But the quality of the work done is much better. Proof of this is that Now, central government has made an institution compulsory. This is called Rural Livelihood Promotion Society, National Rural Livelihood Mission, National Rural NRLM. Each state should also have a state rural livelihood mission. And central government has said that when you build your mission, if you want to know how to do it, go and visit 3 places. One is Andhra Pradesh, second is Tamil Nadu, and third is Bihar. The model is so good, it is being operated. Have you visited that place, Jivika program? Yeah. Okay. So Jivika is being is shown as a model plan for how to run the Jivika one, and Mr. Arvind Chaudhary has been doing very well in this that. Of course, we have the advantage of being supported by the World Bank. And World Bank's this support is very atypical in the sense that in most of the cases, World Bank gives one-time money, 100 crores, 200 crores, and then they go away. This program have been running for 6 years, and they are still continuing. They want to see as a showcase model how these community mobilization should be done. That's one of the reasons I said.
One of the problems you rightly seen that you go to any of the states in South and Western India and other parts of the country. One normally has to address couple of agendas. But in case of Bihar, you have to address simultaneously several agendas. In Bihar, nothing was there, practically. While social democratization has taken place, what Dr. Ghosh mentioned, that the people, here simultaneously million mutinies are taking place. But simultaneously there has not been any concerted effort for productive investment, productive work because of the permanent settlement and because of the historical reasons, which is not there in the Raitwari area. So one has to take that thing into consideration. For example, I remember a couple of years ago, Mr. Chidambaram was addressing in connection with election SAG related group of women. Now that was unthinkable in a place like Bihar, that one can address a constituency of SAG women in Tamil Nadu. But things are changing, things are improving. When you were mentioning about the growth rates and other things, one of the things that our base is very low. I can give you one instance which Srivastava will be able to understand much better, that our plan funds prior to 2005 was about 2,000 to 3,000 crore. Now it has jumped to 34,000 crore. I'm coming to that point. Secondly, for example, our budget was about 20-25,000 crore. Now it is 91,000 crore. Next year it should cross 1 lakh crore. The additional money that you are mentioning, that was part of the division. When division was worked out in Bihar and Jharkhand, there was no compensation. So they had decided to give 1,000 crore per year. So it was a very small sum. You see the trauma that Bihar was subjected to, because the entire asset was created in the southern part of Bihar, which is now Jharkhand. And even on the question of debt, for example, debt was divided not on the basis of the asset but on the basis of the population. It is very ridiculous. So the 2/3 of the revenue was with the Jharkhand and 1/3 of the revenue was with Bihar. So we were disadvantaged in many ways, historically and even in relation to the division as well. But what we would like to mention that in the last couple of years, Bihar had this identity of a failed state, non-functioning state. Bihar is still one of the poorest states, but at least that identity has changed substantially. our brand has changed. People are thinking in terms that Bihar can do good. That is the most important thing that we have been able to do. Our developmental deficit is so, so frightening, you cannot imagine. For example, whatever roads that Chinmay was mentioning, our roads are still nowhere in comparison with, say, Gujarat or Tamil Nadu. You have six lanes or 8 lanes. We cannot think in those terms now. But at least we have been able to build some roads. We also aspire to have a 6 lane, 8 lane roads in the future, but that will take another, I think, 50-20 years time. But things are changing. Things are on a much improved state. And it is good that at the conclusion of your visit you are meeting us. So any of the queries that you have, any of the things that is there in your mind, you can always clarify.
Sir, just one point. Sir, I want to comment on something what he said, sir. So just one point. This aspect of 3,000 to 34,000 crores, this aspect was brought out by a villager to me, sir, while we were visiting a small village yesterday. A social activist over there. Well read, we were surprised to actually find him over there. And he said that this, though this is increased, there has been no focused expenditure of this. And a lot of money of this is not going at the correct place where it should be going, sir. I do not know what is your views on this, but this I am telling you, in a village, a person giving this outlook, and he knows these figures, he knew these figures. It is just you are confirming it to me, sir.
No. I mean, the point is that, you see, once upon a time when there was if you see the two types of corruption which was there in the country. One was Bihar model, other was Gujarat model. In Bihar, the input was eaten. In Gujarat, it was the turnover related corruption. Now, that is not the thing. In Bihar, assets are being built. Maybe the quality may not be up to that mark. But what Chinmay has mentioned, he has given elaborate figure. The number of bridges that has been built, about 12,000 bridges were built in the last couple of years only. The roads and various other assets we have been. If you move around in Bihar, in Patna town itself, several buildings are coming up. You go to any other parts of the state, several things are coming up. So the tangible thing which will be seen, say, in the next couple of years may not be visible now, but we will be able to see it in the next couple of years. But the planned funds are now being utilized. Bihar is no more a state where input things are being siphoned off. Actually, there is a tangible work is going on. So there is a qualitative. There may be some corruption here and there that cannot be ruled out. And the government is quite vigilant. I mean, they have created a number of agencies to stall this thing. But essentially the work is going on. That is the most important thing. And I think when you visit Bihar, say after 5 years, things will be dramatically changed. Yes.
May I ask you about the things that relate to security? I would like to know more about the effects of extremism that obstructs Bihar's development. How you tackle extremism?
Effect of extremism
yes, how to tackle this?
No, I mean, extremism is a problem in Bihar, there is no doubt on that. Because if you see at a national level, out of 600 districts in the country, I think more than 150 districts are affected by this extremist movement. Now, if you see historically, these 150 districts are historically, there was a government deficit or developmental deficit. And in most of the districts, they were also part of the either old permanent settled area or contiguous district to that. So one has to take that into consideration. However, in Bihar, there has been a concerted strategy to co-opt this extremist group into the mainstream. I think one of the strategies which Bihar government has been quite successful. One, they have been able to give reservations in the Panchayati Raj institutions. About 10% Dalit, I think another 10%, 20% for Annexure 1 in Panchayati Raj institutions. Now in the process, many of the persons who were in the extremist movement, they got co-opted in the Panchayati Raj system. And there has been several dedicated programs through which this extremist movement is attempted to be contained. It has not yet been fully contained, because that would entail several other things. For example, land reform and various other things. Because one of the agenda Bihar government has not been able to take up is the land reform question in a substantive manner. In the way this has taken up in West Bengal and in many other places. I think at the techno-managerial front, building roads, building bridges, building buildings, these things have been done in a very good manner. But on the institutional front, I think some of the points which needs to be addressed, I think we expect that in the next couple of years, these things will also be addressed. And the institutional question is one of the very important things. And then only there is going to be some substantive redressal of the problem. Would you like to say?
I just, about the extremism, I tell you, there are about, 150 districts in the whole of India which are extremist affected. Most of the districts are in central India, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, parts of Andhra, etc., etc. The districts which are extremist affected in Bihar, all these central India districts are very backward, very backward. The land is not fertile there. There are some mineral industries which they do, land is not fertile there. The couple of districts in Bihar which are extremely affected are not backward districts, they are prosperous districts. Bhojpur, parts of old Ara, etc., etc., they are prosperous districts. The difference between extremism in those areas where there is a development deficit and the extremism in these areas where there is not so much development deficit is that in these cases the social inequality is more important than the development deficit. Okay? See, the social inequality is more important. Some of the policies of the Bihar government where disadvantaged groups are given certain political space in the Panchayati Raj institution, local level institution. This has acted as some kind of a ameliorative measure for containing the activities even now are very strong. But there is also, again Shaival would have said it better, you see there is a difference of politics in Bihar and politics elsewhere in the country. Not only Bihar, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are the two states in India where in last 2 decades a new set of people have come to power. They are not traditional elites as in Andhra, as in Tamil Nadu, everywhere. The same old people are there in the politics, whether they are in Shiv Sena or in BJP or in Congress or even in West Bengal, Congress and the left front, etc. Same people. In Bihar and UP in last 2 decades, a new set of people have come out. They are not traditional elites. They are one generation back, they were absolutely disadvantaged people. Normally, broadly speaking, they are from the middle castes of the middle section of the society. Okay. Now, once this fundamental change has taken place in the political arena, that people from middle caste or level can have some space in the political one, then the tension is relatively less. Tension is relatively less. That's one of the reasons I think we have been able to the state government has been able to manage. That the social discrimination part is not so high. So, anyway, Eva, should we
I have a question. Do you study development in Central Asia? If yes, how do you rate development in Central Asia? These countries are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Thank you.
CAS. Central Asian States.
Yes, I said.
You see, if the two countries are economically related or not depends upon the amount of trade that you have between the two. As far as I know, the amount of trade that we have with these Central Asian countries, our political relations are very good, as far as I know, with those countries, especially with those countries where? Kazakhstan. Our political relations are very good, but the economic relations between India and those countries probably is limited. One of the reasons is that there is no trade route, because in between comes the Himalayas, so there is no trade route, so our relations. But it is always better to have countries around you who are prosperous and politically stable. It is always good. Some of the countries that we have in other parts of the country, say Nepal for some time was a problem for us because political stability also affected us. Okay, Bangladesh sometimes has problem also, that also affects us. But it is always good to have neighbors where the economy is good and politically stable. And that's the Central Asian issue.
Historically, India had a very good relationship with these Central Asian states because it was part of a Soviet Union. And India always had the best of relationship with this country. Even when the division took place, I think India was one of the very few countries which established diplomatic relationship with all these things without any delay. So they gave recognition on this thing. But I think as far as what Dr. Ghosh mentioned about the trade relationship, the immediate trade relationship that we need to work out, that we are one of the most energy deficit states, energy deficit country in the world. So we need to have some sort of a connection with these Central Asian states as far as the energy deficit is concerned. There has been a concerted bid by one joint company, which was Algeria based and Kazakhstan based, I don't remember right now. They wanted to build a pipeline from Kazakhstan, Iran, then Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. And it was said that because of the global machinations that could not be built, because they didn't want that India should become a energy surplus because of this oil connections. And there is I have that book with me, but I don't remember right now. It's a wonderful story that how America promoted some of the Afghanistan problem primarily to stall this petroleum pipeline connectivity. Yeah. Because
sir, what he is asking is, like you have done a root cause analysis of development of Bihar.
Yes.
You being ADRI, Asian Development Research Institute,
right.
Have your organization done a similar analysis for these countries?
No, unfortunately not.
That is his question.
Unfortunately not, but I will be very happy if your government gives us the sponsor some project, we will be able to do that. It's not a problem. Because in our cognitive world, entire Asia is very much there. So we don't mind, because we are located in Patna. Primarily our focus is on Bihar, but intellectually, our whole cognitive world, Asia very much figures.
Last. My question coming back to Bihar now. We've seen, we've visited many places in these 3-4 years. A lot of briefings have taken place. Everybody has shown us a lot of data. Firstly, this point was brought out by one of my friends. What is the authenticity of this particular data that is being used and how it's being collected and what is it correct or not? That question mark remains. Could you tell us what are the specific schemes that have been launched either by the government or by NGOs or self-help groups to empower the women? Because if we empower women in the rural area or even in the urban area, the state will progress. So could you throw some light on that? What is the fund allocation? Where if the funds are coming from government, what is the kind of allocation which government is giving? If funds are collected through NGOs and self-help groups, how much is the funding? And how is it helped the state? Thank you.
I think, you see, I think other colleagues will be able to answer this question much better. But you see, at a macro level in the Hindi heartland states, you see, in relation to Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, even UP to great extent, here the level of liberation of women or freedom of women is relatively much better because of various things, because of various social movements and other things. What Dr. Ghosh mentioned that in Bhojpur, for example, which is one of the most developed states, yet Naxalite movement had taken roots because the entire movement was directed against social oppression, and social oppression was related to women only. So in that sense, woman is relatively better in relation to the other. I am not saying in relation to Tamil Nadu and other places. One of the things which government has done in a very dramatic manner when this government came, they instituted 50% reservation for women in Panchayati Raj institution, which is absolutely unthinkable. This has not been done anywhere. Now, initially, what Dr. Ghosh also mentioned, that initially when women were being projected as a mukhia, so it was thought that they were sponsored either by the husband or by the powerful social group. Possibly that remained true for initially for a couple of years, but soon they started taking initiative on their own. For example, there was we were witness to many places that when they had gone to file their what is that called? Nomination. They had gone there with a ghungat, with a veil. But by the time the election results came, that ghungat was gone. So they were taking decision. They took a very firm decision against. They took a very firm position against the policy of excise policies and various other things. So in that sense, government has been able to take up macro level policy prescriptions for inclusion of women at a provincial level. But apart from that, there are several things. For example, cycle program for the woman, poshak for the woman. Then there is a strategy to have one high school in every panchayat. Then Panchayati Raj institutions have to be given quite a larger than life image by building a Panchayat Sarkar, that is some sort of a Panchayat Secretariat in every Panchayat in Bihar. Now, if you go to Tamil Nadu, you go to West Bengal, you have a huge Panchayat Secretariat in all the Panchayat institutions, but in Bihar we don't have. But government is planning to, we have more than 8,000 Panchayats. Now, government is trying to build those things. So there has been several steps related to women related agenda for empowerment of women. Would you like to supplement?
See, again I tell you that compared to these stories that you hear from places like Haryana, Western UP, where bride burning or Khap Panchayat, these incidents are relatively less in Bihar. Partly because of the social conditions that we have, and partly because they are very poor, they are uneducated, they are unorganized. Even then, the socio-political process in a village in Bihar is far stronger than many other parts of the country. I'm not talking about Kerala or Tamil Nadu, but compared to many other states, the socio-political process in the village level is much stronger. People vote, okay. Some of the things I have asked, did you vote last time? We got 90%. Yes, I have voted. Anyway, so far as these specific programs, I will give some examples. One of the indicators of gender discrimination is the literacy rate for men and women. This was about 25% in 2001. We have brought it down to, I think, 18%. Reduction of 7% in gender disparity is not a small thing like a place in Bihar. After all, we are very poor people. We are not Haryana, we are not Punjab. We are very poor people. Reduction one. Thanks to UNICEF, this institutional delivery is now much higher in Bihar. Of course, there is also a cash transfer element there. If a woman delivers her child in a hospital or 1400 rupees, so there might be some fudging of data. I am not ruling out, because 1400 is not a small amount. But even then, even our primary survey, that proportion is going up and up and up. In the primary schools, where the changes are taking place, people who are 30s, 40s, 50s, they have already crossed their preparatory portion of their life. But the primary school, elementary school, the proportion of girls are now almost as same as boys, 50-50, जो कि होना चाहिए. That's it. 5-10 years back, girls used to be 30%, boys used to be 70%, but now it's become slowly and slowly 50-50. Many things have been done, but one of the things that I've done, which has done exceedingly well, you might have heard that, a girl is given a bicycle once she reaches standard 9. ये जो bicycle program है, this program has been excellent, and it has made tremendous difference in the enrollment of not only enrollment of girls in the school, but crossing standard 8 and reaching standard 9. Oh, that is quite visible. If you have gone many of the villages, they will show you. So there is we also prepare a gender budget. Are they getting a copy of the economic survey we are preparing?
Some of the literature. We have to take a presentation just 1 hour from these.
We are also prepare a gender budget to show what amount of money is being spent especially for women. So that sensitivity is there in the administration.
Last 2 days that we have actually gone around, sir. The progress is definitely palpable, there is no doubt about it, sir. But at the same time, so there are 2 things which stood out starkly. So one was process of consultations at the grassroots level. So I thought the schemes are good, there is no doubt about it. But I think the process of consultation at the grassroots has not been done. What is good for place A may not be good for place B. So I think that kind of a mix has to be there, and that can only happen once we have this mechanism. The second issue is about the delivery mechanism. I think the building is there, but it has got nothing. The PSC is there, it is maybe well stocked, but it is not open. By the time we were there at about 10:30 or so. So I think the delivery, these 2 are essentials, which actually need to be done. And yeah, there is a lot of solution. While the issue about the women, I think the village in which we went and the Jivika, it was a model village. I think the kind of an empowerment which has been done is really phenomenal, and it is for everyone to see the enthusiasm with which they show their products I think is something we felt very happy as a group that look, this is what I would say is the social empowerment. So once we concentrate at the women, I am sure the effect would be much greater and much larger. The second point that I want to make is about Bihar as a state has so much to offer as far as the history and the archaeology is concerned. It's got a rich historical and cultural past, especially the places of tourism. I think there is hardly any infrastructure, and if we actually bring about the infrastructure, there is so much of earning which can be done even through the means of tourism.
If you see the comparative perspective, you had been to Bodh Gaya. Those of you who are from Bihar, if you had gone to Bodh Gaya 20 years before, and now, there is a huge difference. There is a huge difference. We have much better infrastructure in Bodh Gaya now. Of course, we don't. Someone says that if Saudi Arabia can make a lot of money because of Mecca, and what's the Christian one? No, not Vatican. No, the Middle East one. Bethlehem. They make so much money. We could make same amount of money from Bodh Gaya also, because whole of Southeast Asia.
Egypt makes a lot of money.
We don't make as much money as they could. I agree with that. But comparatively speaking, things have improved. Now Gaya has an international flight. There is a Bangkok Gaya flight. You must be knowing this. You know this? No.
Bangkok Gaya flight.
Bangkok Gaya, there is a flight. There is a flight. Because those who in the many East Asian, they will come to Bangkok. That's a very big airport, and from Bangkok we come there. That's one. So far the partition is concerned, yes, this is a problem. What has happened is that the Panchayati Raj institution, PRI, has come. The power is decentralized. The resources are also decentralized. Roughly speaking, right now, one Gram Panchayat spends about at least 20 lakhs in a year. 20 lakhs is not a small amount for about 6 to 8 villages, okay, in a year. That's not a small amount. But the Gram Sabha and the meetings of the Gram Panchayat are not held regularly. And this power is enjoyed, is monopolized by the Mukhya. And the process is not followed. The democracy is not followed. This has been severely criticized. One of the reasons it is not severely followed is that these people did not have a Gram Panchayat office. A building to hona chahiye. You must have 2-3 rooms where people assemble daily. Of the 8,000 panchayats, Gram Panchayats, 1,500 have been provided with a Panchayat building, Panchayat Sarkar Bhavan as they call it. 1,500. We are going to build some more. Once these buildings come, you know, the group will be more solidified. The interaction will be more, and there will be more transparency in the transactions that we have together. One of the, but anyway, we all know this is one of the limitations is that 20 lakh expenditure is monopolized by a single person. Actually not single, 2 persons. Panchayat ka jo secretary hota hai, what is his name? Gram Sevak. The Gram Sevak and the Mukhya, they make a pair and they take all the decisions. Of course, they have to perform, they have to make some decisions, but this problem is there. I am also aware of it.
Sir, I have a question on agriculture. Yes. Now, India, as we are all aware, is the second largest food grain producing country in the whole world, and about 50% of our labor force is working in agriculture, direct and indirect, organized and unorganized both. If we compare it with the United States, which is number 1, they have only 2% of their labor force which is working on agriculture. So, in the medium to long term, we are looking at people who will be going away from agriculture. That is the only way out. So what are the recommendations of your institute for the rural livelihood for these people who will eventually be moving away from agriculture?
You don't have to compare ourselves with America. to realize that agriculture is important for us. 90% of the people live in rural areas and 70% of the people earn their livelihood from agriculture. Unfortunately, you know, Punjab has Punjab, Western UP and parts of northern Rajasthan. 100% of the area has the benefit of assured irrigation, 100%. 98, 99, everyone has got assured irrigation. Either canal or tube well. The availability of water, groundwater, is much more in Bihar than in Punjab and Haryana and northern regions. Much more. We are in the Gangetic place. Here, to get water, you have to dig only 25 feet. In northern Bihar, you have to dig only 25 feet, and you don't need a metal tube. You need bamboo boring. वहाँ पे bamboo boring होता है. So water is that easily available to us. Unfortunately, in spite of that, right now, only 60% of our net cultivated area has got irrigation. The government did investment in irrigation up to 70s. After that, the public investment in irrigation practically stopped throughout India. So those who got the benefit, the so-called green revolution areas, they are still reaping the benefit. And rest of them suffering, West Bengal, Bihar, parts of Orissa, many parts of Andhra Pradesh, except for Godavari Delta, we are still suffering. Unless this one is taken care of, that 100% of the area has to be given assured irrigation. This can be done at a cost which is much less than in Punjab. Both West Bengal and Bihar and UP. This is Gangetic plain. Here provision of water is much less water.
I think his question was a little bit different.
Absolutely.
His question was primarily that America, 2% people are dependent on labor force. Yeah. And what you said that eventually people will shift from agriculture to other, where they will get.
Then I was coming to that. You see, sorry, I got a little long story. If you want to change this scenario, people have to move out of agriculture. If people have to move out of agriculture, then someone has to invest in non-agriculture. Okay? Where would that investment come from? One of the way it has done in most other places, the investment comes from agriculture itself. Classic example is Andhra Pradesh. All the money that you see in Hyderabad, which is now going for Telangana, the money had come from Godavari Delta. It is there the money was produced, then they went for tobacco, then they went for cinema halls, then they went for production. All this got exhausted, then the money came to IT in Hyderabad. In Bihar, the same model has to be followed, because no one else is coming from outside to invest here. So agriculture has to grow, generate surplus, and then invest elsewhere so that people can move from outside agriculture. That's the way it can go.
Sir,
The whole national model. Maybe the surplus from agriculture has gone to tobacco, then film, then knowledge industry. For example, in Punjab, surplus from agriculture has gone into small scale industry. Where is that? So that is the whole national model. Even in Maharashtra, for example, the surplus had gone to sugar industry and various others.
Henry, my friend from Kenya, he has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Sir. Thank you very much. The Asian Development Research Institute, I want to believe it cooperates and collaborates with certain Asian states. Which are these states? And apart from the sharing of data, what benefits, key benefits, does this institute get from these states? Thank you very much.
We don't have any collaboration with a particular state. We have a collaboration with international agencies, whether it is World Bank or various other agencies. Or we have a collaboration with academic institutions. It is not usually the collaboration is between state to state, not a individual organization. We are a non-government organization. There is nothing like that. Essentially, I would like to just briefly give you an identity of RG. RG was started in 1991. We have about one center. RG as such is a research organization. Mainly we are working on social science research. The other is Center for Economic Policy and Public Finance. We are is a delegated public finance organization. We are leading the economic survey of the Bihar government. We are preparing the memorandum of the Bihar government. Various other economic related. Then we have two centers related to literacy. One skill development, one various training and material development program for literacy. We are also hosting International Growth Center, and that is being sponsored by LSE and Oxford University. So these are the things, and we are mainly working on social science research. For example, you were mentioning about the cycle program. Two very good, I think you can give example about two research work was done at IGC related to cycle program, and Chinmay himself was involved. So you can possibly briefly mention about it.
Yeah, so basically we evaluate some of the schemes that is run by the government. So by again, the Bihar government approach us to look at this bicycle scheme, whether it's actually working or just the public perception that same. So we did a evaluation of that project. So one project just looked at the impact of the program, whether enrollment actually increased, and the results shows that it did, like around 6 to 7 percentage points increase in the enrollment rate. And second was to understand the mechanism behind the success of the scheme. So how this was implemented and why the money is actually reaching to the beneficiaries. So again with other departments we have done a lot of studies. So International Growth Center basically works with the government and in areas that is like relevant for them. So yeah, this is just an example.
We will be working on energy. There is a dramatic improvement about as far as the energy availability is concerned. Possibly a woman can briefly speak on that.
So the IGC has been working with the Department of Energy in Bihar as well, and we were approached by the Energy Department to try and evaluate how revenue collections can be increased across Bihar. We have rolled out a couple of interventions in which we are trying to link, say, the supply of electricity to a neighborhood would now depend on the kind of revenue that comes from that neighborhood. And we are helping the Energy Secretary implement this in real time, and this is likely to help the state government generate more revenue, hence generate more electricity, and hence increase rural and urban electrification. So this is a long-term project, but we should have some results in about 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, please.
Well, I have a question to ask to friend from Thailand.
So, I'm delighted to be here. My father worked for Air Force, so it's a pleasure to be among you. I grew up in Air Force business. Particularly about some of the points that came up in the discussion. One was about the sanctity of data and the process. To just give you a time trend, in 1925, the British government, 27 published, they did a survey on how they are spending on various provinces, and the survey told them that in Bihar, the spend on general administration, education and other administrative apparatus was between 25 to 40% of what it was in most other provinces. So it started from there. By the time India gained independence, we were at the half mark in terms of per capita income.
You have discussed all this. We're not there. Speak about industry.
Sure. Just wanted to give one thing on that. Second is with respect to industry. Now, the key challenge that the industry department over here faces is is one, place its comparative advantage, be it in terms of food processing and agricultural availability as well as labor, in context with three important challenges that they face. One is in terms of availability of electricity. Till 2001, we used to get around 500 megawatts of electricity, and the pace of things now is we would be adding 500 megawatts every 6 months or 8 months in the next 2-3 years. So that's the scale at which Bihar is right now moving. A lot of villages have never lived with electricity, so you don't know what social transformation in terms of industrialness or skill development that would bring. Second is connectivity and availability for industrial parks. The government has been toying with a lot of various mechanisms by which they can either acquire land or let people come together and show some group entrepreneurship. Somebody talked about community focus. People mobilize themselves and build these industrial parks, and government is willing to incentivize that. Now these are all innovations that are happening. One thing in Bihar is that the private enterprise has largely been missing. So the innovation in overall social sphere has been led by the government. We hope that as industries come on board through many of these schemes, some of these innovations would be shared by the private enterprise, and that will percolate into institution building at multiple levels. The third thing that Bihar as a state faces in terms of challenge for industry is availability of finance, not just in terms of land and other things, but even finance over here. There's no equity culture, and even debt culture is adulterated. The debt culture in Bihar is that if you have a successful, let's say, call center of 200 people, you want to scale it to 500 people. It's not easy for you to just go to a bank and say that, hey, I want to have this amount of funds to be able to raise that, because banks have not been in the habit of lending in a trustworthy manner to the enterprise. So what happens is you'll have to actually scramble together to put your own equity, and that equity is also not equity that is beyond your first-hand network. There are companies who have gone IPO from Bihar and have become a role model of how equity gets integrated, how global capital or even national capital, national skill gets integrated. So those are the contours of where industrial setup apparatus stands in Bihar.
One question, Dr. Ghosh.
This is about Thailand.
Question to you.
Yes. You see, Thailand was a very quiet country, but recently it has been in news because you are going through some political turmoil. Now, when political turmoil takes place, sometimes it is between two persons. Okay, India is witnessing that. I don't believe in that kind of discussions. Sometimes it is between two political parties. That is relatively more meaningful. But more than that, such political turmoils are between two different perspectives on politics. Idea as well. Can I have some idea from you? What is the reason behind the Thailand's current political upheaval or the process that you are going through?
Actually, for me, I think the problem in Thailand now, we are in like maybe it's no way out or catch-22, but I think the situation will be getting better because at last democracy will prevail. Now some protesters come from aristocrats and middle class, but only if 5 or 10% of population. Yes, it's numerous, but they want to freeze democracy for a while, but we don't know how long it freezes. Take time to set up a new administrative to anti-corruption but most people still believe in democracy, and we think democracy elections maybe correct themselves and get the proper and more proper government in the next period. But now the two ideas, the two camps are still fighting, and so far no extremely violent yet, because we Thai persons very tolerant. Very tolerant persons. Protesters go to shut down anywhere, but be patient and not affect much. So even the situations seems for foreigner like upheaval or something, but it still die down and not affect to
What is the
Bihar.
social background of this lady who is heading the government now?
Yingluck Shinawatra, her sister, but her sister, she is a sister of Thaksin Shinawatra. Some elite not like Thaksin because Thaksin some part of corrupt, but some part makes so much development for poor people. So now like equal. In the times of social media now, rumors of fabricate stories can spread over. But I hope that maybe it's like behind development, that elite and poor must be cooperate without one exclusion. So because in my country we have elite, fewer elite, but they have a strong power. So if they understand the true change of rural society, they will amend their mind and full cooperate with the whole country. I think it's the prevail of democracy.
Thank you.
I have only one question, that is about, you briefly touched about land reforms in Bihar. What has inhibited the governments in Bihar to embark upon this land reform, which has not been done? Elsewhere it has been done. And do they fear something great? Would it be a great provocation leading to something? What is it that inhibits?
No, you see, the land reform is a necessary, land reform is a necessary precondition for development. And especially any states which is part of whole Bengal presidency and permanent settled area, land reform is a must. If you see nationally, land reform has taken place all over the country. Land reform entails several things. One, updating of land records. That has not taken place in Bihar. So now some move is there for updating of land records. For example, Raghuram Rajan Committee recently, they give a report on financial sector reform. So that constituted, that had one section related to land reform, that until you have updated land records, the bank cannot lend. So that is one of the most important things. Secondly, consolidation of holding. For example, in Punjab, consolidation of holding had taken place long back. So that is also a very important thing. Third is giving rights to the, what is called, sharecroppers. Now, if you give rights to sharecroppers, then they can take resources from the bank, and in turn they can invest and the productivity will automatically increase. For example, in West Bengal, by resorting to updating of land records and giving sharecroppers right, 4 to 5% production increase. They couldn't do reform in other fields. So that is why there was a problem. But they could do that, and that was quite an important agenda. The fourth is distribution of the surplus land. People are concerned that if surplus land is there, that is going to be distributed. I think that element has gone down substantially. That may be true in some of the North Bihar villages, where surplus land is still a reality. But even if you don't distribute the surplus land, these three components, updating of land records, consolidation of holding, giving sharecroppers the right, that will bring completely sea change in the rural scenario. RG had taken initiative, and Bihar government had constituted Land Reform Commission, DBON was heading it. They had submitted the report. But essentially land reform can only, it's not a techno-managerial thing. One has to take a political decision. So I think until unless government is full subtle and full strong enough, we will not be able to.
I just wanted to add one sentence. You see, what does land reform mean? Some people get money from land in the form of rent. Rent means you get money for holding a land, not for working on it. Okay? Now, rental income is not good for growth. If the owner gets money from without doing anything, then it is not good for him. Land reform means land should go to those people who work on it. That might take redistribution also, but basically it should work on it. But unfortunately, those who earn rent from land are also the most important elite in Bihar. They are in bureaucracy, they are in legislature, they are in judiciary. So that landed gentry is spread throughout the elite structure. So it is there they prevent it. Some of the states have been able to do it, for example, West Bengal did it. In West Bengal, in the bureaucracy, there was none who had a land interest. Okay? In legislature there might be some. In bureaucracy there was none. In the judiciary there was none who has a landed interest. Okay? In most other places it has been. But this is not the case. Here the landed gentry is still holding power in several places. So they prevent the process.
Actually, until unless the elite is dealing from the land,
you cannot do it.
Cannot be implemented.
Land reform is that the engine of growth as well as social engineering.
Of course, social engineering.
Without social engineering,
Yes,
you
this is
can't.
the basic thing which has to be.
Okay, we'll have the last question. I think Shyam had a question. That is the last question.
So, we are here for the past 1 week. Visited various places, sub-regional hospitals, villages, and seen presentation in the secretariat also. My observation is that economic development without a specific or cohesive population policy is a difficult phenomenon. And at every place wherever we have visited, I find this aspect missing, and missing from your slide on challenges ahead. Bihar, being a populous state, will continue to face the challenge of the huge population, because whatever growth is taking place, and capped with the fact that we were achieving high growth because the base was low, and the excuse has already started coming in that in future we may not be experiencing or seeing the high growth because the base has gone up. So my observation is that in a state like Bihar, or in fact in the entire country, there should be a specific focus on the population control measures. And second thing which I kept on asking the people in the villages also, what is their agenda for their social upliftment? The women said that their topmost priority is to control the consumption of alcohol. So these two aspects, I would like to have your comments on these two aspects.
Firstly, our presentation was very brief, and the challenges that Chinmay had shown you was limited. I mean, we could have thought that this is going to be a brief presentation. So next time we'll take care that he gives an elaborate presentation. Secondly, the point that you mentioned about this, it's not a question of excuse. It's not a question that our growth is primarily because of our base is low. Of course, that is a fact. But we are also, that is a big challenge, that apart from public investment, from where we can garner private investment as well. Possibly you are aware that our Chief Minister, our government has been arguing for this special category status. Special category status would ensure that there is a private investment as well on the basis of certain tax breaks and other things. So the real challenge, as you have rightly mentioned, is how to generate, apart from more public revenue, how to get more public investment, more private investment. What we had mentioned to you earlier, that the trajectory of development will essentially be on the private sector investment. And that is only possible in most of the states in the country. Is either the surplus which got generated in agriculture, that got invested in industry, and various other things. So that one has to take into consideration. I think land reform is one of the most important agenda that we have to take into consideration. But in case of Bihar, as we have discussed earlier, that you have to take simultaneously several agendas together. In most of the states, most of the agendas were taken in 50s, 60s. Bihar has just started taking these agendas which should have been taken much earlier. So that is a big challenge. That itself is a big challenge. And land reform, various other things are a big challenge. Inviting private investment is a big challenge. Being a landlocked state without a sea front is a big challenge. Because most of the destination of investment is in the seafront states. And naturally so, because if you have to transact anything, it is much easier to do it in a seafront state. So these are the challenges that we have to take. But before doing that, we have to build and resurrect the state structure. Our state structure itself was very, very weak. We are building practically from a scratch. So I think we have been able to build to certain level, but I think it will take a couple of years more before the state can become an instrument for development in a very decisive manner.
Sir, just sorry for this, sir. So this was the background, this we have heard, sir, you told us. The focus of his question was, sir, what is being done to control the population of the states? I'll be very blunt on that, sir. The thing cannot work, this growth rate and nothing can work, sir. Till this population is controlled.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add, sir, we have been asking this question regularly, sir. We have not got a satisfactory answer whether this is in a focus also or not, sir.
Okay, so I think I slightly disagree on this point, whether we see population growth as a problem, whether it's a symptom or it's a causing under, historically, look at any country, population, so I mean also look at from people's perspective, if the infant mortality rate is very high, then asking them don't have like too many kids is a ridiculous thing to say. So essentially what happens, like population control happens through urbanization rate, development and all. So more indirect approach is far more effective rather than direct population control, which is like not human. So I personally believe that we should focus more on development, and that would in the long run and that like pick up any country. This is how it has happened. Yeah, of course. Education is part of it.
We got the answer from the secretary to the governor, if you are right, because what he said was you are actually educating the women, and once women literacy improves, possibly they themselves think of bearing their children. This is going down to
We will not discuss this, sir. I just wanted the answer from them. I heard an answer also. I really don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But we're not getting into discussion.
Okay, I think we will not get into this debate. I will like to remind ourselves that Mr. Gupta, Mr. Ghosh, they are heading a research institute. They are not responsible, for governance. And having said that, I take this opportunity on behalf of the NDC team visiting Bihar to thank Mr. Gupta, Mr. Ghosh and his team of very eminent and very qualified members here with whom we have had the opportunity to interact over the last an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it is so very appropriate that like the earlier groups, the visit to ADRI has taken place on the last day, when having had interacted with the secretaries and the senior government officials, and thereafter having gone on ground, visiting the villages, having our field visits, that we have had this kind of brainstorming session. I am quite convinced, and as much I have interacted with the citizens here in Bihar, there is definitely a transformation. There is a ray of hope, maybe after decades or centuries of fog. Yes, it does take time to build the state and get the state to a high trajectory of growth, which I am sure with eminent groups like yours will lead the government, enable the government. And our best wishes are there with you, and we will be recommending that the NDC should continue to send their team for interaction here with the ADRI, which happens once in 2 years. Now, I'll request Mr. Gupta to kindly accept a memento from the NDC team. And thank you so much to all of you.